You could feel it the moment you stepped inside that locker room. Cardboard boxes stacked next to lockers, players clearing out personal items, long hugs, quiet conversations, and that unmistakable finality that only comes when a season is officially over. This wasn't just another end-of-year clean-out. This was the closing of a chapter for a group that went through a lot together. Wins, injuries, adversity, growth, and moments that only the people inside that room will ever fully understand. And for you as a fan, this is one of those moments where everything hits at once. Pride in how far they went, frustration with how it ended, and that lingering question of what comes next. What stood out more than anything was the tone. This didn't feel like a locker room that was broken or defeated. It felt like one that was disappointed, sure, but also confident in what they're building. Guys weren't walking around like the window slammed shut. They were walking around like they know they're going to be back. That matters. Culture matters. And when you hear player after player talk about brotherhood, about stepping up for each other, about loving coming to work every day, that's not something you can fake at the end of a season. Before we go any further, if you want to stay plugged into everything happening with this team all off-season long, make sure you're subscribed and notifications are turned on. We're pushing toward 1,000 subscribers, and every single one of you helps get us there. Also, let me know in the comments, honestly, what was your main emotion when this season ended? Was it frustration, pride, optimism, or a mix of all three? This final day also serves as a reminder that the off-season doesn't mean inactivity. This is where narratives start forming. This is where recovery begins. This is where players reflect on what worked and what didn't. And most importantly, this is where the foundation for next season quietly starts getting laid. You don't see it on Sundays yet, but it's happening. And that brings us to the biggest reason this locker room didn't feel hopeless at all. Because buried inside all of the goodbyes was some genuinely encouraging news, especially surrounding one of the most important players on this roster. When you hear the details of what George Kittle shared about his injury and recovery, it completely changes the outlook of this offseason and beyond. That's where we're headed next, because this update matters more than you might realize. The mood shifted the moment George Kittle started talking, because what he shared wasn't just an injury update, it was a sigh of relief for the entire fan base. Achilles injuries are scary. They're the kind of injuries that immediately make you think worst-case scenario, long recoveries, lost explosiveness, maybe even career-altering consequences. But in this case, the details matter, and the details were genuinely encouraging. George made it clear that his surgery went as well as possible, and that alone changes the conversation. The tear was high up on the Achilles, near the soleus, which is exactly what surgeons hope for when this injury happens. That meant no drilling into the heel, a cleaner repair, and better blood flow to the area. Those three things together significantly improve recovery potential. This isn't about rushing timelines or making guarantees, but it does mean this wasn't the nightmare scenario many fans feared when the injury first happened. George himself sounded relieved, optimistic, and energized by the prognosis, and that confidence matters when you're talking about rehab. He was honest about where he's at. He hasn't even started sweating yet. Rehab officially kicks in soon, and he made it clear he's attacking this thing aggressively. But what stood out wasn't just the medical update, it was his mindset. George didn't sound like someone worried about whether he'll be the same player again. He sounded like someone annoyed he can't get started yet. That's classic Kittle. Football is his favorite thing in the world, and being away from it only fuels that fire even more. If this update gave you even a little bit of relief, go ahead and tap the like button. And let me know in the comments, Do you believe George Kittle will play meaningful snaps next season? Yes or no? What also matters here is the support system around him. Jed York was one of the first people to check on him in the locker room. Players from across the league reached out immediately, offering advice, support, and sharing their own recovery experiences. That tells you two things. One, George is respected far beyond this building. And two, this organization takes care of its guys. That stuff sticks with players. It reinforces why this locker room feels the way it does. And maybe the most important part of all this is what George said about the team itself. He talked about grit, about young guys stepping up, about a group that didn't blink even when key leaders went down. That perspective matters coming from someone who has seen it all. He doesn't talk like someone clinging to the past. He talks like someone who believes the best football is still ahead. And as encouraging as that is, George isn't the only cornerstone who showed real growth and maturity as the season closed. Because when you listen to the quarterback talk about this year, about his mindset, his preparation, and how much he evolved, it paints an even clearer picture of why this team feels positioned to move forward with confidence. When you listen to Brock Purdy talk at the end of this season, it doesn't sound like someone searching for excuses or trying to spin the narrative. It sounds like a quarterback who understands exactly where he is in his career and exactly where he still needs to go. That matters. Growth in the NFL isn't always about stats. A lot of it happens between the ears, and Brock was very open about that. He talked about mindset, preparation, and the mental side of the game being his next big step, and that level of self-awareness is what you want from your franchise quarterback. One of the most interesting parts of his reflection was how much he leaned into learning this year. Having Mac Jones in the quarterback room mattered more than people realize. Brock spoke about picking his brain, studying how he prepared, and learning how to handle week-to-week NFL life more efficiently. That's not insecurity. That's maturity. That's a player who knows that getting better sometimes means listening more than talking. And you could tell he genuinely valued that relationship. The other big thing Brock touched on was stability. This offseason is different for him. There's no contract cloud hanging over his head. There's no daily speculation. Mentally, that's huge. He can focus on his family, his training, and refining his game without distractions. And even when he talked about injuries, there was no self-pity. He made it clear that when he came back, he was ready to play. He didn't think about limitations. He didn't change how he made decisions. That confidence in his body and his process shows growth. If you're still watching, let me ask you this. Do you believe Brock Purdy took a real step forward this season? Yes or no? Drop it in the comments. And if you believe he's the long-term answer at quarterback, make sure you're subscribed because we're covering every single step of this journey as this team moves forward. We're closing in on 1,000 subscribers, and your support really does make a difference. What also stood out was how Brock talked about the locker room. He didn't frame this season as a failure. He framed it as a year of growth, a year where guys stepped up, where adversity forced development, and where the team learned what it takes to sustain success. That doesn't mean the ending didn't hurt. It did. He said it himself. If you don't win the Super Bowl, it doesn't feel successful. But there's a difference between disappointment and doubt. And there was no doubt in his voice. And that brings us to the part of this season that might get overlooked if you only focus on the final result. Because when you step back and really look at who played, who grew, and who gained experience under pressure, it becomes clear that this year quietly built something important. That's what we need to talk about next. One of the biggest mistakes people make when evaluating a season like this is only looking at how it ended instead of what was built along the way. When you actually break it down, this year forced growth in ways that a smooth, injury-free season never could. Young players were thrown into real roles, not spot duty, not garbage time, but meaningful snaps with games on the line. And by the end of the year, those same players didn't look overwhelmed anymore. They looked prepared. You heard it from inside the locker room. Guys talked about rookies and young contributors who might have looked shaky early, but steadily got better week after week. That's what real development looks like in the NFL. It's messy at first. There are mistakes. There are learning moments. But when those reps come in high-pressure situations, the confidence gained carries over into the off-season and into the future. That's how depth turns into reliability. This team didn't blink when injuries hit. That's not a cliché. That's a reflection of preparation and culture. Players signed off the street were asked to learn the playbook and perform. Young defenders were suddenly trusted in big moments. Offensive linemen were asked to elevate their consistency. And instead of folding, the group adapted. That matters going forward, because depth wins seasons in this league, not just star power. Let me ask you this, and be honest in the comments. Did this season make you more confident in the 49ers' depth? Yes or no? And while you're down there, which young player impressed you the most when their number was called? If you believe this season was a stepping stone rather than a failure, hit the like button so more Niners fans find this conversation. What also stands out is how players talked about leadership. Several guys mentioned realizing they had a voice they didn't even know they had until this season. That doesn't happen in comfortable years. That happens when adversity forces people to step up. Those lessons don't disappear in the off-season. They become part of the identity of the team. And when you combine that emerging leadership, improved depth, and hard-earned experience with the established veterans who are still playing at a high level, it paints a very clear picture. This wasn't a lost year. This was a year that strengthened the foundation. And when you zoom out and look at the full roster, the coaching staff, and the mindset inside that locker room, it becomes obvious why there's real belief about what comes next. When you put all of this together, it's hard not to feel a sense of belief about where this team is headed. You have a locker room that genuinely enjoys being around each other. You have leaders like George Kittle, who are already focused on attacking rehab and getting back on the field. You have a quarterback who's self-aware, grounded, and committed to getting better every single year. And you have young players who were forced into the fire and came out more confident because of it. That combination matters. This is what a real recipe for success looks like in the NFL. It's not just talent, it's mindset, it's preparation, it's having veterans who set the standard and young guys who aren't afraid of the moment. Yes, the ending stings. It always does when you don't finish with a Super Bowl. But that bitterness can either break a team or fuel it. From everything we heard inside that locker room, this group is choosing the second option. The off-season now becomes about building on what was learned, not starting from scratch. Cultivity will be a priority. Refinement will be the focus. And continuity, both in leadership and culture, is the advantage this team carries forward. There's no sense of panic here. There's a quiet confidence that the work done this year is going to pay off. Before we wrap this up, I want to hear from you. Do you believe the 49ers can win a Super Bowl with this core, yes or no? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you're riding with this team no matter what, help us reach 1,000 subscribers by hitting that subscribe button and liking the video. It really does help the channel grow and keeps this community strong. We're going to be with you through every step of this off-season, from rehab updates to roster moves to training camp storylines. This journey isn't over. In a lot of ways, It's just getting started. Let me know what you want covered next, and we'll keep this conversation going.